I used to be sent down into New York City with food to my brother who lived in a kind of slum-like place and kind of a hippie commune, and I would deliver steaks and food. And he lived with street people. He wasn't a street person, but he lived among them. And I sat down with a street homeless guy, and he lived in the stairway of my brother's condemned building. And you can imagine a 10-year-old from a wealthy Westchester upper class home and school, all white for the most part, sitting around with a black homeless guy talking about life. And it's that kind of stuff that made me want to see more.
Hi, Lincoln. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. This is Peak Performance Perspectives, where we empower entrepreneurs to master health, wealth, and have a fulfilling relationship. Your journey spans from mountaineering, physics, shamanism, psychotherapy. How do these diverse paths that have shaped your life infer upon your understanding of what peak performance is? What is peak performance to you?
I guess if I had one word, I would say I'm an explorer. I like puzzles. I like getting lost. I like novelty. I like to be wowed, and I don't like to be tortured and made miserable. But as one of my mountaineering mentors said, mountaineering's got a lot of suffering in it. I don't know why people do it. And I remember a lot of suffering. And I've taken a lot of initiatives to have relationships with my two wives, which were, what's the word? Not foolish, I don't think, but hopeful, spontaneous, and mountaineering. They have a very positive. And I've gotten disabused, but relationships are a little different because they're always chaotic. And if you ask for, like, the world is round. If you sail for one direction, you come back to the same point. But relationships are flat. You keep going, you run off the edge of the world, it seems. That's what I found. You stretch them, they break. And peak performance to me is, I guess I hate to say it, taking things to their breaking point. And maybe that's a little bizarre, but isn't that where things get the most amazing?
I
Right?
love it. I've asked this question so many times. Nobody has said it like you have. Peak performance is truly taking things to a point where it's a breaking point. Just teetering right at the edge.
Yeah, the edge, that's right.
I love it. You mentioned two things, right? Which right off the bat is so intriguing. You talked about exploration and being open-minded and the exhilaration of mountaineering and puzzles, which speaks to a childlike fascination, which you have
Mm,
seem to retain, which is
yeah.
not part of the normal conventional adulting process. It's like the normal conventional adulting process is just like learning how to not to dream anymore, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
you also spoke about the enjoyment of struggling, right? That you find in struggles, which is also not part of the regular adulting process because we're all
Yeah.
seeking comfort. What
Mm.
is it that is in you that you think makes you this way than the opposite, like how everybody else is?
I don't really know. And the realization you're talking about has come to me only recently because everybody thinks they're normal, or right? There are some people who think they're abnormal, but they're a special case, usually. I thought I was normal. And then you get to this point, depending on when you start moving, that you start to wonder why everyone else is so dull or flat, disengaged. And that happened to me fairly early. I have a Freudian point of view. I blame or credit my parents for their engagement. My father was very engaged and my mother was very distant. And that resonance really bugged the shit out of me because I could never connect with my mother. And my father was always far ahead of me. So I struggled. And also your environment, right? So I had a sister and brother who were 10 and 12 years older, which meant they really weren't part of my orbit as a kid. And it had the influence of making me live in a more mature environment so that the friends I developed tended to be older. They weren't in my same grade. And I think it's that dissonance. I'm trying to be general in answering your question and not saying it's just because of who I am. Because I don't really think I'm subscribing to the idea that we don't really have all that much free will. A lot of what we decide on is genetic or social or cultural or personal, and it's reactive and due to our environment. So I think I took it and ran with it. I was frustrated with my parents, so I got involved with older kids, and then I had older siblings, and they introduced me to older people, and I started to see the world more broadly. And give you one example. I used to be sent down into New York City with food to my brother who lived in a kind of slum-like place and kind of a hippie commune, and they never had enough to eat. And I would deliver steaks and food. And he lived with street people. He wasn't a street person, but he lived among them. And he invited them in. And I remember visiting him. I must have been 10. And I sat down with a street homeless guy. And he lived in the stairway of my brother's condemned building. And you can imagine a 10-year-old from a wealthy Westchester upper class home and school, all white for the most part, sitting around with a black homeless guy talking about life. And it's that kind of stuff that made me want to see more. So I started climbing, and climbing is a great thing to see more because nobody does it. At least no one did it in the 70s. And nobody knows what you're doing. I remember going climbing and bringing pictures back from the Canadian Rockies and putting in my high school. And no one knew what the hell these pictures, what were you doing? And I didn't know. And I started to develop a traction for exploration. And then all these things, all the questions, computers, you didn't mention computers. I spent 30 years in computation. So computers and physics and psychology and all these things. And now I'm just starting to realize I don't have the same background that other people do. And just like you say, normal people do normal things, it's true in every field. There's a definition of normal, which you're supposed to be. Work on normal problems, take a normal attitude, have a normal social life. And I'm just starting to realize in my 60s, for some stroke of maybe you'd call it good luck, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that, I didn't get normal. And the good part of that is I don't have that many boundaries. I'm not afraid of walking across boundaries. It bugs you. Everybody thinks you're full of shit and they don't support you and they don't include you in their club. And they won't read your papers or they won't publish your papers or they won't read your books. And I publish a lot and write a lot. And so it's frustrating. But the truth is that I got good ideas. And it's not that hard to have good ideas. You just have to have courage and desire. So all I can say is it builds like snowballs. What about you? You were an explorer. I can't understand why you left India. Why? What a thing to do with no money. Why did you do it?
Young and naive with a dream.
All right. Where'd the dream come from? What'd you read about? Yeah, books.
American history. I read it. I think the most impactful chapter I ever read in an American history book was the Boston Tea Party. And I don't know what it was, who wrote it, but they wrote it so well that just on pen and paper, even today when I close my eyes, I remember what I visualized, like a ship and the tea and the ocean and the blackness of the tea in the ocean. It was so vivid. Without realizing it, I think at a very young age, I decided I'm going to go to Boston.
But different ages, people took different roads to adventure. It used to be joining the Navy, merchant marine, shipping. That was the way to see the world. And then military they're different kinds of things. But you can just stay in your little town and become an insurance adjuster. And a lot of people do that. So now I'm in Canada, which is strange for me. And I went from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the US to Canada 7 years ago. And I'm still having culture shock and I'm having ecology shock, right? The ecology is so different here. Where are you? You're on the East Coast, I think, aren't you? Yeah.
I'm in Austin, Texas.
Austin. All right. Yeah. I lived in Austin for 10 years. In the good years before it, when there was still black barbecue on the south side of town. Well, that's probably
we still have black barbecue on the south side of town.
Oh, good. You don't have to go to Bastrop or something. Oh, good. But it was easier to get to. And we could go to Monterey and do crazy things on the border and stuff. Anyway, what was I saying?
Yeah, we're talking about journeys, and then you went to Canada 7 years ago.
Yeah. So Canadians are strange. That's okay. I do want to say in the defense of Canadians, although they have a huge middle class, very tightly condensed, broadly adopted, they have a lot of outliers, and you see them in industry and performance, actors, Mike Myers. A lot of people. So they have, and maybe it's because there's so much conformity that there's so many people who want to break out. So it's interesting. And I could complain all day, and it's good to complain. This is interesting. I'm a therapist now, and people come to me to complain. And they come to me to complain because other people don't want to listen to them complain. And I appreciate complaining because it's pushing against something. It's part of how you cross a boundary. First, you have to see the boundary, then you have to approach the boundary, and then you have to step across the boundary. And you don't get much support at any step. People don't want you to see the boundary. They don't want to show their dirty laundry or whatever it is. And they don't want you to confront them on their boundary. And they certainly don't want you to transgress their boundaries. And that's what I like to do. So it makes me a good therapist.
I love it. I want to go back to having experience at the age of 10 in New York City, talking to a homeless person who lives in a bubble that the bubble you lived in, grew up in, would never really collide. We're talking Westchester, white family, right? So it's a profound impact on you. And you're starting to realize that you like exploration that leads you to mountaineering, all these things. Entrepreneurship. Almost every entrepreneur at some point in their life starts feeling, am I a freak? Because others know about all the television shows and all the movies that are coming out and heading out to their friends' barbecue over the weekends. And I'm in a room working 16-hour days, answering questions from my mother and my cousin, you don't even make $1. What are you doing? Go get a job. Your life, your experience, you are becoming literally a category of one.
Yes.
Being coming from a family doing physics, computer, as rewarding as it is to be able to pursue all of these things and be in all these bubbles, it's also extremely lonely.
Yeah, it's expensive too. It can't be denied that people who don't have some resources, they can't afford to do it. Like I say, don't quit your day job. It's hard to have a day job and be an entrepreneur. I could never do it. When I was entrepreneurial, it was like you say, 16-hour days. I don't know time for a day job. That's ridiculous. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. And it also has to be pointed out, one thing that we're missed is that doing things right results in success. I hate to inform you that doing a lot of things right results in failure. I'm sorry. It's just, 99% of the time, things don't work out. Thomas Edison said, I failed my way to success. If you're doing new stuff, how do you know it's going to work out? It only works out if the path has been broken for you. And then you find yourself on some ladder, someone else's ladder, corporate ladder, something like that. And before long, you're towing somebody else's line and you're getting rewarded. And it's insidious because then it's like operant condition. You're rewarded for salivating when the bell rings. They give you more money. I have a client who makes a tremendous amount of money in investment banking, and he's not at all satisfied, and the industry does not sound very morally healthy. And he's still chasing the almighty dollar at $1.5 million a year. And people make 10 times that, and they're still chasing the dollar. And on the other hand, you can make very little and be very happy. But getting back to being an entrepreneur, I do think you have to have, if not money resources, something going for you. You had, what do you want, gumption or conviction? Those are important, very important. I'm not sure they completely make up for lack of money, but if you don't have money and that's all you've got, then you learn the two things which I never wanted to learn and I never thought were important and I never wanted to see in my life. The two things I have to learn are sales and marketing. We cry and debase and condemn them all the time, but they make the world go round. I hate to say, they really do. And I still don't think that much of them, but I spend at least half my day doing them these days. Here I am on a podcast and writing and publishing and a lot. And what do I get for it? Not much immediately anyway, but you've got to do it. You got to build it up. One of these days, it's like prospecting. 99 out of 100 holes are dead or dry. And then one hole will keep you going or rocket you to the next level.
For sure. But coming back to the idea of category of one, like relating to entrepreneurs who feel like nobody understands them,
Yeah.
the feeling of loneliness because you're doing something that nobody else does. How did you deal with that? Because it's so easy to get pulled into the other side because it's so much easier. Continue to have that conviction. How do you do that?
I think there are a bunch of things. First of all, you have to be creative. So you have to be attracted to something new, like crows are attracted to shiny things. You've got to be attracted to novelty. It's maybe part of who you are. And you've got to be bored with doing boring things. But then that's a tautology. Still, like my son goes to school. He was homeschooled and now he's going to ninth grade. And they teach him, he brings back homework, the French Revolution. And I say, don't do your homework. Throw that garbage in the trash. Tell your teacher this is bullshit. And I understand that he doesn't want to be just this. So I say, write better questions. Tell your teacher what's important in the world. And it's true, he should. But he's only 14 and he doesn't quite get it yet. And he's a little afraid of the stick and the carrot. And it's okay. But I'm a very funny parent in that I insist he do the opposite of what they say. And that's what I always did. Here's a funny story. I didn't like gym class in high school. Where you go play dodgeball. I don't waste the time. Run around the track. Give me a break. I said, I want to go bicycle racing. But it was not one of the program. How do you go bicycle racing? You get on your bicycle and you go race. That's what I did. Come during class, I disappear, get on my bicycle and go race a couple hours. And that got me in trouble, right? Because I was cutting class. And the only person who appreciated me doing that was the gym teacher. Because actually, that was his mindset. He probably also thought, what am I making these kids play dodgeball for? This is not getting them anywhere. So he appreciated me, but I still got in trouble. And I remember the principal of the school, you chewed me out in front of the class. And so this was a line I crossed. I saw the line, which you weren't supposed to see. You're supposed to believe that you were learning. And I said, I'm not learning. I'm not doing this. And I took some initiative. And then you start to see, it's like you start to see through the system. It's like if you go to the doctor and say, I don't feel good. And they say, oh, you're fine. At some point you realize, no, I'm not fine. And I don't care what you say. Going to school, they say you're learning. I said, no, I'm not learning. And at some point it becomes a kind of a drama. It's almost funny, perverse sort of way. It's like an existentialist play where all the actors are reading some strange script, and you find a couple of people. I remember an English teacher who was encouraging 1 out of 50. And why me? Why did I do that? I had a father who was self-made. He invented the area called architectural photography, which before that was not considered an art. It was just a kind of marketing thing, and he elevated it to a higher level. So he had that attitude, and he always used to tell me to, I don't know, knock him dead or something. I don't know what he'd tell me to do. And he always worked very hard. And he also fraternized with people who were creative, like Buck Fuller and some of these Sandy Calder, unusual people whose work was eye-catching, eye-popping. And then so you see Bucky Fuller invented the geodesic dome, and you look at these things and they're so unusual. And Sandy Calder invented the mobile, and they were like dramatic and engaging. And I didn't see that stuff in my world. So what are we getting at? Why did I do it? I caught the bug. And then you go into these fields. I went into physics because I thought I'd learn more answers, but instead I learned more textbook answers and more. I learned what was supposed to work. And then at an advanced level, they'd show you why it didn't work. But if you were precocious and you said, I don't want to see why it does work, I want to see where it breaks, then they would be angry at you because they say you don't know enough to question it. And then, of course, you start getting suspicious. And then at one point, gets the entrepreneurship thing. I said, I got all those computer skills. Where is this most useful? This was before widespread automation. Okay, let's build a database that could be useful for businesses. Why not? There are problems with that. It's very specific. And how do you make it general? And everything's got to be rebuilt every time you got to apply it to a new business. So I said, okay, let's make some generic financial accounting software that could be applied, and lots of technical problems. And then, like I said, the real killer is marketing and sales. Who you're going to speak to, how you're going to speak to them, what's the elevator pitch, are they going to understand it? And I did that for 20 years, and with some success, technical success. But financial success, not really, because the people who buy that stuff aren't technical, and they need to be sold in a special way. You have to be part of the club. I played golf with them, and I didn't play golf. And I'm an oddball. I'm not the corporate type, or I'm not the corner suite type, what do they call that, executive. It was a struggle, and I eventually said, oh, hell with it. I'm going into psychology, which had its other problems. And I've never really left any of this stuff behind. I don't know about you, but I find it all sort of part of the bigger puzzle. I even use physics in psychology. A lot of people are interested. They say, oh, quantum mechanics, tell me about it. And about the most you can do is confuse them. But confusing is good, because if they're stuck with some other thing, getting them distracted is a good way to start about other things. So
as someone who grew up as a kid, right off the bat, you were not a rule follower. And not a rule follower in the sense that a forceful rebel, but because, like you said, you could see the absurdity in some of the laid out rules that a lot of people are just following for no reason.
Yeah.
And growing up, then as an adult, you're working in computers, you want to build something, cool, you want to build something useful. But again, the minutia of the process of dumbing things down and schmoozing some people, right? It's just not who you are, right? So now when you're a psychologist, you've studied psychology, when you're looking at people, the vast majority of people, you're helping probably people who are on the other side, who are rule followers. Do you have an inherent sense of respect from where they're coming from? Or is there, just frankly, honestly speaking, you saying in your back of your mind, what are you doing? It's just absurd.
There's a little bit of both of that. But I've come to learn that the people who come for counseling, coaching, therapy are often the people who are ready to break out. They're dignified to the point, I don't know where I would get to that point, where they want to give up or break out of what they've learned. Okay. Sometimes that's because there's a crisis, a health crisis, business relationship crisis. Okay. Or, some accident of great magnitude and they're trying to process it. But they have a degree of flexibility, which often is lacking in people who are continuing to respond to the ringing of the bells. The system we're in, capitalist semi-democracy, is supposed to reward us for following the rules. And rules, they do keep keep people from killing each other. That's a useful thing. But they also keep people from rocking the boat. And sometimes that's not a useful thing. I prefer to rocking the boat to a point, right? Everybody's got their limits. I remember I have a lot of experience in the Caribbean. People in the Caribbean are fishermen. They would take me out in these boats and they would ride these outboard motors and they would just like skip over the tops of the waves. And I'd just be terrified, you know? There's a little boat launching over 5-foot waves and traveling 16 feet in the air and smack. And they would be laughing, hanging onto the gunnels, and I'd be cowering under the seat. So there's limits to all this nuttiness. And I'm not really a seaman, it goes to show. The people that come to me, they see who I am, right? And I start to reveal my cards pretty quickly. And I'm very successful because I eliminate the people who don't want to put up with me, which doesn't mean I'd be successful with everybody else, because most psychologists and counselors are not like me. They're more of the make you feel better variety. And I'm not that. I want you to feel worse. If you're breaking out, I want to break the egg and get you out of the egg. I don't want you to put you back together the way you were before. It's a self-selection process. I find that people respond to me. It's not that clear cut, because there are some people in the gray zone, right? Like depression is a gray zone thing where you don't know what to let go of and you're attracted to things or attached to things that are bringing you down and you have a negative self-opinion. And I'll try to be encouraging, but I'll also try to get you to think differently. Depression is a good case in point because it's almost like psychotic. Everything seems bad. For a depressed person, it's very hard to get them to look on the bright side of anything. It's the nature of the beast. It's pervasive. And then things do get crazier. Of course, some people just can't, they just lose their shit, I guess. I have a few of those people that have to be dealt with differently. Then it's a little, I don't exactly know what I'm doing with some people. I don't know where up is with them. But for the entrepreneur or the person who's just trying to make their life better, I'm like a buoyant force and they've got to tell me where up is. I'll go where up is and I'll take them up. And if they don't like it, I have one client, all these clients are so, they're really beautiful. He got his act together over a whole life period of trauma and seemed to really hit his stride and level up to a higher level of consciousness. And then his wife wants to divorce him because he's no longer dependent on her and she's feeling left out. And okay, I understand that. Do you want to go back to being an invalid or not? So you build, this is the whole problem with even entrepreneurship where you think it's so objective. You build yourself into, if not a box, then a ladder. You've built yourself a ladder. Let's be optimistic. A box is too containing. A ladder at least has a way out. But where does it take you? To wealth? To celebrity? To stability? Are these the things that are going to satisfy you? And I have to ask myself this all the time. What am I going toward? And the simple answer is a little more money would always be nice. That's a fairly safe answer. That's not hard. That's not really the problem. The problem is, are you the kind of person who's going to get off the path to improvement? And that's not to be judgmental. Okay, nobody has to crucify themselves. You can retire. Pensions are nice things. That would be nice. Sometimes if you joined the military when you were 3, by the time you were 30, you could retire. It's amazing. I should have joined the military, but that never would have worked out.
For someone who doesn't want to follow gym class, I really hard to believe you would follow military work.
If you knew better, they'd say. But there was a graduate professor who used to say, get your passport and then you could travel, which is to say, keep your nose clean and then you'll get the authority to think for yourself. But the truth is, I don't think it works. If you buy into the whole passport thing, then you're stuck going to where they respect your passport and you're not going to cross into terra incognito.
Very true. You have, before anything, you talked about you are not a doctor for everybody, which is very true because, as you said, most psychiatrists, more psychologists are more concerned with making the person feel better as opposed to telling them the truth. And True. You are a person who tells the truth. The truth
No, it's just the truth I see. It's just the truth I see.
That's the most truthful you can be. The only truth is the most truthful you can be. So therefore, you're telling the truth.
Oh, you could have your own truth. You could fire me. That's true.
You are seeing a version of the truth and you're saying what it is. So that's the most truthful you can be.
I'm trying to tell you, in a sense, what I see your truth to be. I'm not just saying believe in Jesus because your soul will be saved, like some people do. I'm trying to say believe in yourself because you will grow bigger that way.
Having worked in so many domains and having worked with a certain type of clientele, right? You're the perfect person to ask this question, that the ones who are wanting to reach the edge, as we define peak performance to be, do you think it's more nature? Is it more nurture? Is it genetic? What is your hunch on what has made them the way they are?
I would have to suspect there's a little of each. I think there's certainly genetic aptitudes. You might be a very good person with languages or with reason and organization. Those might be genetic things. And the opportunities at the time and the culture and your environment might suit certain aptitudes that you have. I remember one of my teachers, Steve Weinberg, he was a precocious young kid. He got his college degree at 17 and is 20, I think. And he just was rewarded at every stage. And so when I met him in his 50s, that's where his mind was. It's like he said, you have to be skilled in these aptitudes in order to advance in my field of physics. And incidentally, I, Lincoln Stoller, was not skilled. He had little time for me. And it was very interesting because I am not skilled in the way he was skilled. He's got a brain the size of a library. And it's amazing. But he also was not very creative. Okay, that's okay. He was creative solution, puzzle solver, but not puzzle maker. Anyway, what? He grew up Bronx High School of Science. He was rewarded at every step. I'm sure he had high quality genes, whatever that means. And the whole thing, Ivy League education. And so partly that's nurture, right? Partly it might be nature, I assume. And they do say they have these strange statistics. The children of people who've gone through hardships, Holocaust survivors, the children of them tend to be more resilient. And then the implication was that it's actually genetic somehow, not just the children didn't go through the hardship, but you could understand that the parents could be an influence. Certainly nature and nurture. Was there a third thing that you added into your mix?
Not just nature, nurture, genetic, the blend of them. Even when you're describing this professor, as intelligent as he was, probably as intelligent as his toenail, it doesn't seem like person, or maybe just the way you described it, as a person who's living on that edge. And it seems like a quite
I don't
tame
think
a
so.
personality.
I remember at one point he was invited to give the sort of science perspective at a spiritual convention where they have Indian gurus and stuff. And he really screwed it up. He didn't understand how the whole thing was. He found himself completely out of his element in people talking about aliens and extraterrestrials. And he made a point of never talking to those people ever again. And he never did. So you could say he didn't really understand the line and he stumbled across it into the realm of science fiction, fantasy, crystal gazing, and then felt like his pants had been pulled down and he put on display and he never wanted to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do that, and I like to do that, I actually do, I join groups of crystal gazers and spirit channelers because they got some wacky ideas and I love to hear what they say. One of my favorite books is written by a woman named Anderson Reed, who's a spirit channel, and she says, when someone rings your doorbell and you answer the door and they don't have a head, don't let them in. Not all spirits are good for you. They're not all there for your enlightenment. There are spirits that will take advantage of you. And who else tells you that but somebody who's deeply entrenched in some strange world? Other people say be nice to strangers or something like that. Yeah. And she said, no, judge people, use your intuition. And you say, oh, Cohen, nobody's going to ring my doorbell and not have a head. But in her world, she might see people as headless. I don't know. So whereas my teacher, Steve, could never deal with those people, I think, what the hell? Like the homeless people, they've got a point of view. When I travel, at least when I was younger, I wouldn't go to hotels. I'd sleep under bridges and I'd find bushes to sleep in. And you see a different part of the world, right? You sleep under a bridge and you're going to meet some different people than you will at the Super 8 motel or the Marriott or something. And that's the mountaineer in me. Go to new places and do strange things. Yeah, talk.
No, I'm listening. This is so interesting. You help high performing individuals now, and you help them find clarity in the same way you help them also overcome some of the significant life struggles, right?
Yes.
If I'm listening to this and I'm suffering with some issues, is there a framework that you follow? Is there a certain steps that you can lay out for somebody to just start to begin to unravel the mess they're in?
The easiest advice is follow the pain. The things that work out, the things that don't work out are where your box is poorly formed. They're the seams that are broken, and they're usually painful, or they've caused pain. I'm not saying stick your hand in the fire, but look at the fire. Look at where you've burned yourself. Look at where you've stumbled. Look at the stone in your shoe. It's an indicator of something that's not working, because I'm a big believer in failure. Failure is when you've encountered something that didn't fit, and you didn't put it together right. No, there's no blame in not putting together something correctly. But success is when you've learned how to do it and you do it again. Here's a good example, which contradicts my point. I really enjoyed learning to fly airplanes, but it's a very restrictive pursuit. You've got to do everything right because the costs of doing things wrong are high. And so the people who are in that sport tend to be very conventional people. They like to follow the rules. They like to stay in the box. And there's a lot of boxes inside boxes. And here I come along and I just fuck everything up. Boy, I just drove them crazy. They drove me crazy. And I crashed the airplane several times and I broke my back once. And I'm lucky to be alive. And I still like flying, but I like it for different reasons. I like it because what happens if you do this? And what happens if you go there? And like I say, show me the edge of the world and I want to go over it. If you've got a person with problems or struggles, I have to say, embrace your struggles. And if you're not ready to embrace them, maybe you're not ready to deal with them. Because if you come to me, I'm going to say, what are your problems? And I'm not going to say, oh, those aren't important. I'm going to say, let's make them bigger. Let's see what they're saying to you. Let's see why they happened. What is the nature of your dissatisfaction? If you can't make it better, make it bigger, make it worse. I want to hear it. I want to understand it. Where is it going to go? Are you going to change your life? Or are you just trying to fix your life? Are you going to just take a drug because your joints hurt? Or are you going to start working out, which is going to make your joints hurt more in order to build them up? Maybe it won't work. I don't know, but I'd rather try to build myself up than come to rely on a crutch that I might end up being dependent on and limited by. That's what I'd say to people. Engage your problems. Like Edison and the electric light bulb. I'm sure he invented things. Why we just remembered the light bulb, I don't know. But we know a light bulb works because it's in a vacuum and it's a heated filament that doesn't burn up because there's no air inside. But for a long time, they didn't get that. And their filaments would burn up. And I mean, it's not a very complicated solution, but I guess it took a lot of trial and error to figure out a light bulb. And if he didn't like that, what would he say? Oh, hell with the light bulb. I'll go on to the meat grinder or something. It's like, no, you've got to want to solve the frustrating puzzle. And sometimes it's a painful puzzle, like in relationships or other situations.
For entrepreneurs, just for everybody in general, like you're saying, identification of the problem. Like, where's the pain point? Identification of the problem. And then eventually working your way out of it, asking yourself the question, do you want to stay in?
Around?
Yeah.
Yes. All the possible alternative mindsets.
Yeah. So that's what I was getting to, which is great, which is that is the answer almost always within them. Because so many of us know the problem that we are facing. We can tell you all the details about how it originated and theories about how it affects us. And then we come to a point where I have now created some type of a block within myself that causes me to be afraid of taking this type of action, doing this type of thing. How does your process enable them to get past that?
I guess the one word that comes to mind is reframing. So take your example. You're a bodybuilder. Bodybuilder means you have to do a certain amount of stress, which could become painful, and you have to recognize it as a routine, and you have to do it continuously. And you're asking yourself, what is enough? What is too much? What is not enough? When can I take a vacation? What do I need to work on more? You need to be critical and you need to be accepting. You need to feel rewards, but you also need to feel pressed to continue. And these are all very vague points. You have to find them for yourself. In your case, it's interesting because it's all physical and you can't ask anybody else. I mean, you could say, what's the normal thing people do? But still, you have to listen to your body. And if you don't listen to your body, you're not going to be exceptional. That's for sure. You'll just be average. Okay, and some people go to the gym 3 times a week just to be average. That's not a bad thing. So I try to go for a walk every day. Like I told you, I have this lung thing from COVID. I can't work out the way I used to. And what do I get out of going for a walk every day? Not much tangible. What I get most out of going for a walk, aside from some exercise, is a time to let my mind wander. And I talk to myself and I think about things. And then most of the time I forget the great insights I came to. I think I forget them. Maybe they'll come back later, some form. I don't know. But that whole process is it's like a garden. When you turn the garden over, put air in the earth, you water the soil. You don't get anything immediate back. It's like mental gardening. You have to put time in. This is not, what I'm talking about now is not, I don't think tends to be a problem for an entrepreneur. They know they have to put time in and they have a spectrum of things that they're investing their time in. And they've already made a certain commitment to the outcome of things. And if you weren't patient, you wouldn't be an entrepreneur. The problem comes with frustration, I think, at least in my experience, myself and with other people, and sometimes with biting off more than you can chew. I think that's an easy thing to do. I've done it a few times. And they're interesting experiences. It's like the burned hand learns best. You learn what not to do. And maybe some things aren't as exciting as you thought they were. And you moderate yourself. So I'm a sounding board for some people. I have a client who complains about his boss and the predatorial nature of his business and the people he has to put up with. And he says he wants to get into a more relaxed frame of mind. He wants to start a family, live in. And I say to him, well, look, do you think that you're going to make this transition to a happy, gentle, permissive father if you've spent your whole life being a cutthroat, ball-busting executive? It's like the grass is greener on the other side, but it's not greener, and it's the same. It's your person. So what are you going to do? You can change your personality. And if you're trying to change your personality, why not do it right now? Why not just be satisfied and accepting and relaxed and not be so pissed off at the struggles of your work environment, which is what he's so good at and such an exceptional achiever at. I think this is a problem that entrepreneurs have. You get into the entrepreneurial mindset and you have no patience for marketing and the girl in the bikini selling the spark plugs because it's ridiculous. But as a therapist, here again, I'm lucky I talk to interesting people. If I talk to boring people, I'd probably lose my patience. I don't care about the milk in the refrigerator. I don't care about the dirt on the carpet. But then that's interesting too, because all of that's a metaphor. People will talk about things that are not their real issues because it's the game they play. And I'll take those people out if they want to come out. But if they don't want, then they're not going to work with me. I'm not going to play the game for long. What's your question? Rephrase your question, because the last thing I remember is how do you progress?
Yeah, a lot of the things you talked about, some of them are tactical too, right? But let's talk about, because we talked about reframing the mind. So let's talk about a specific example. A lot of entrepreneurs feel like they can't take action because of imposter syndrome, or they have a fear of putting themselves out there on social media because they hate marketing. But these are mental blocks that they have created, or experiences in their lives have created, that have formed them within them and conditioned them behave a certain way 30, 40 years. And when they come to you and you have used your framework to say, okay, what's the pain point? Where did it originate? Why does it exist? How does it serve you now? And we're now at the brink point of trying to make that shift. How do you make that shift?
Now it becomes a martial art. Now you have to talk about Ji or Taekwondo, bend like the reed and use the force of the opponent against them. Really, I have one client who always pisses people off. He's a little strange, this guy. And he pisses them off hugely. And they lock him up. And I'm saying to him, instead of getting pissed off the next time somebody challenges you, you've got to ask, how can I help you? Because you've gotten into a struggle situation where you've elicited conflict unwittingly. And you're being given more. It's being amplified. You're getting angry. You're getting defensive. They're getting angrier. Now you want to use that against the trend. You want to say, let's change our mindset here. I'd like to help you. You have to be sensitive. You can't say, I'd like to be your friend. I'm a little puppet. That may not work. But you can attempt to be sincere and say, I see things are going off the rails here, and I don't like where they're going, and I'd like to be more positive, and maybe you can help me, or maybe I can help you. So reframing, right? And if nothing else, it breaks the mode or breaks the structure. It's a kind of exploration. You don't know what the answer is, but you're engaging somebody in a serious dialogue. So it's not about the milk. It's not about the dirt on the carpet. What is it really about? What are we trying to do? And often I find myself saying, what's important in your life? What's your purpose? What's meaningful? What would you like to have happened? They use this example like, what if all your problems went away? What would you do now? And I will do this with people. I use hypnosis. I say, let's go to a place where there are no problems, where you're comfortable and relaxed and comfortable. And now let's see your problems approaching on the horizon. What do they look like? Who do they look like? What do they sound like? What's happening in your environment as your problems start to manifest? What do you create? Do they come like animals? Do they come tornadoes? Do they come like machines or evil people? And when they get to you, let's make them bigger and closer and more tactile and more real. And now that you've created a monster, the one that you have in nightmares are the ones you worry about at night, let's talk to them. Let's say, how can I help you? What is your problem? What do you need from me? And do it in your imagination. And I'm amazed that it can have a tremendously positive effect. Partly because I'm asking you to show me your monsters. And although it sounds ridiculous to me, it's not ridiculous to you. And I had one client, I did this routine with him. I said, we're in a cabin in the woods and there's a small boy in there and he's hurting and he's frightened. And you go in and what's his problem? He won't let me in. He's frightened. So the whole thing, and it was just a story. And I don't know what I'm doing with the story because I'm just like adding fuel to a fire that he's keeping going. And then after a while, I lose my point and drift off. And then weeks later, he comes back and says, the change is now the boy is letting me in the cabin. And I didn't even know it was a powerful metaphor. I thought it might be, but I didn't know it was going to be so potent. And it became potent for him. It's like a dream or a nightmare. Working with those is another very useful way. If you have dreams or nightmares, let's work with them. I have a client who said, I have this repeating nightmare. I'm in a bed. It's dark. I can't move. There's a shadowy figure by the bed. They take out a knife and they stab me. And this happens over and over again. And I said, okay, let's look at that figure and let's ask them to show you what they have in their other hand. And the client said, okay, they've given me a golden ring. And I said, great, just remember that. Next time you have that nightmare, get the golden ring. And of course it sounds ridiculous, trivial, but it came from them and it was their metaphor and their nightmare and little things like that. So I'm giving you more of an answer than you asked for, more psychological.
No, this is good. This is great. It's understanding the process. Yeah.
At a lower level, it's like the hypnosis thing, the guided imagery, go to a pleasant place, manifest in some form that you can, what your problem is. And maybe it's not the business. Maybe it's your lack of respect, or more likely, self-respect. And where did that come from? You go back to your childhood. Can you imagine other places where you felt insecure, inadequate, or unrewarded? Maybe it didn't seem like much at the time. I remember some times when I was a kid, and I remember them quite poignantly, when I was a real vandal, or worse than vandal. I would let the air out of tires. I would put sugar in the gas tank. Really fucks up a car when you do that. I would shoplift. And you could say, what was I trying to do? Was I trying to get caught? Maybe, but I never did. And I didn't need to, because now I feel so embarrassed and so bad about that. I really do feel sorry. I wish I could do something for those people. The shoplifting was, of course, small change, but the sugar in the gas tank probably really hits some people. And of course, they were innocent people. I was just going through a parking lot, destroying things. And you could say, oh, psychologically, Lincoln was struggling with his parents or whatever. Oh, one really funny one was I would park myself up above the entrance to the thruway where cars were entering down below in the winter, and I would throw snowballs at them so that the snowballs would hit their windshield with a huge thwack, and the car would and then they'd look around and they couldn't see me because I was way up 30 feet above. And I was really good one time. I really hit that car right in the middle of the windshield with a huge snowball, and that car pulled over at the side of the road, and I gloated there waiting at the side of the road to see what's going to happen when the guy got out. And what happened? But the guy had gotten out a moment before, and he grabbed me by my collar because he knew where I was, and he walked up and found me. And you know who the guy was? He was my science teacher. So what did I do? I lied, of course. I blamed someone else. He said, I wouldn't have stayed here if I had done it. It was somebody else. And I'm embarrassed about that because I should have gotten caught. Now, I did get caught, but I still didn't take the full blame. And I don't know. No, I don't know what it was. It was a boundary, and I was playing with the boundary, and I was breaking the rules, and I was looking for something. I don't know what I was looking for, and I don't know. It was after that I started mountaineering, because in mountaineering, you get plenty of chances to make mistakes and pay for them. And I didn't need to do that kind of bad behavior once I had started risking my life.
We talked about the beginning of the call, how there is really no free will. Right. We talked about this client of yours who is in a ball-busting role where he has to be a certain type of a person. He hates it in that environment. He wants to be more pleasant. And it's not really like his imagination of what he wants to be is not really going to tie in with who he is, right? And we talked about exercises and frameworks and helping get things out of people to empower them with certain tools to be a better version of them. I am not a trained psychologist. I am just a guy that talks to people. And when I talk to students...
Hey, I'm not a trained psychologist either. I went through that training. That's bullshit. You have to be a sensitive person.
Just say a little bit more than I do. When I'm working with students, when I'm working with clients, and they're coming to me with all types of problems, and there are tactical problems and mindset problems. Like tactical problems are very easy to solve. But sometimes I truly feel that some people are just incapable of changing. They might be able to change certain aspects of certain things to get temporary results. But do you truly believe people after a certain point are inherently able to change?
I think that's the next step. There are certain boundaries we build. Some of them are situational, some of them are professional, some of them are cultural, and some of them are neurological. And so this, I would say, is the neurological level. And I try to start talking. I'll always inject the conversation with the idea of what can your brain do? What have you wired yourself to do? Are you a highly reactive person? Are you a empathic person? Are you a lack of response kind of person? Very stable, grounded? Because some of this stuff has been habituated into your nervous system. And you can change your story or your dialogue or your clothes or your behavior. You might not be changing your nervous system. This is like with depressed people. It's like I can paint you a nice and happy picture, but if your nervous system is, depressed, maybe you'll always come back to that low point. And so I would say there is an aspect of training your nervous system. And this gets into another area that I spent a decade, training your brain. And training your brain means basically amplifying or diminishing skills, aptitudes, and reactive tendencies. So it's an interesting, here's some, and this sounds contrived, but this is how it is these days. This part of your brain, behind your right eyeball, in most people, above and beyond, it is involved with the fear, anger, and being reactive. It's not the source of it, but it's where the sort of feelings come together. In the 1930s or 40s, somebody had the great idea that if you stick an ice pick behind somebody's eye and you stir up their cranium, the problem will be solved. And something like 60,000 people got lobotomies, and the problem was solved, not for them, but for everyone else. They turned into vegetables. But it demonstrates the fact that area was involved with that reactive anger, fearful emotions. So you can train that area by training its electrical amplitude, its electrical activity. And I do this with little devices that stick electrodes on your skin, on your scalp, and show you the amplitudes of the electrical waves well, not waves, they're voltages, and training you to change them, lower them usually. This is bad. Quietness is good. And on the left side is executive planning. People who can't get their act together and always missing deadlines and overcommitting. You might look at the left side of their executive planning area. And then there's a whole bunch of other things having to do with emotion and vision and language and what's called prosody, which was understanding subtle cues. And there are lots of subtle cues. We miss most of them consciously, but we pick a lot of them up. And it's a skill that can be amplified or diminished for people who are highly reactive. And sometimes it's quite dramatic that you can see in the brainwaves of people with a particular profile some distinctive pattern that's abnormal, normal being average, better, just average. And you can train them just by saying, look, here's a little bar on the computer screen and it's down in the red. Well, move it up to the green. They say, how? And they say, I don't know. Just like, we'll try thinking all kinds of things and see what does it and try it over. And usually it takes 10 hours, 10 sessions. And you can change many things, not everything, some things. And that's very important. And I try to talk to people about it. And I try to get them to see, because at some extent, you might be able to just see this in your life. Why do things always go wrong for me? Why am I always feeling sad at the end of the day? Why, in particular, why am I waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning? Okay. Some of the answer to your question about what people can and can't change drops down to that lower level. You've wired yourself, and some of this wiring can be changed. Not all of it. It depends. It's a skill. It's an art. You tell me what your problems are. You look at your brain, and this is not invasive stuff. I'm not putting a pacemaker in like they do for Parkinson's or your heart. I'm just training you. And it should be said that this is different from in training you, which is like getting you in the mood with nice music and calm odors, which is different because that works only as long as it's happening or you're taking the drug or something like that. This is in training where I'm actually teaching you to do it. And the idea is that if you learn and it feels better, you'll stay that way. That's the idea. And so that's the answer to it sounds hokey, but it's better than nothing. It works. It works. Nobody's really understands why and when it'll work. So it's a kind of marginal thing called brain biofeedback, offered mostly by psychologists on their own advice. Nobody actually goes to a brain biofeedback therapist by looking up in the yellow pages. They go there because they're told by a psychologist who knows, and not many do because it's not part of the training, that it would be helpful. But I say that anyone involved with peak performance, because that's almost always involved. What's your threshold? What's your threshold of focus, attention? I don't know how you're going to say it. What's your threshold? What's your awareness? What's your patience? Maybe even lowering your pain threshold. You could appreciate that as in the gym. Pain thresholds would be nice to master. I don't know. I ask you, do you feel good when you push through painful repetitions?
Really. There's a certain level of good feeling, but I don't think I have what it takes to sometimes take that level of pain like you would usually see bodybuilders taking. I don't think I see them. And I'm like, I don't know. I know what is the optimal amount of pain that my body needs to take to be able to grow. And I'm happy with that. I don't think I have what it takes to just continue with the full reps and the 3/4 rep and the half rep and gearing up to a point where you literally cannot hold on to it anymore.
There's another answer which should be mentioned. The whole mindfulness thing. There's putting your mind in another space, going to an altered state. Everybody has to do this when you go to the dentist. you pretty much have to go to an altered state because you can't sit there and say, oh, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. That just won't fly. You have to, also maybe they'll give you Novocaine, but it should be mentioned that hypnotherapy has been used as an anesthetic. They've actually done major surgery under hypnotic anesthetic alone. And it's not popular because everybody's afraid to do it and nobody can be sure it's done, but it works surprisingly well. And it does a lot of really bizarre stuff. You can make warts fall off. Yes, you really can. And nobody knows how, but it's fairly effective. Of course, you need to have somebody who knows how to do it. Anyway, it's not my specialty, but you read this stuff and it's well documented, especially like the surgery under hypnotic anesthesia. That was done in India when they didn't have anesthetics and they had a lot of sick people and they did a lot of surgeries. And in fact, I don't know how widespread this is, but I certainly have seen many references to surgeons who understand hypnosis. And it would be common sense that you would be concerned with this and would want to know all that you could do as a surgeon. And it's just it's weird, okay. But it's another answer to the question of how to get somebody to a level they didn't think they could reach, using some tools they already have. And I can't do that with everybody. Some people just don't go there very quickly. And I could go on in more detail about the kind of skills you need. You have to be imaginative, and you have to be visual, and you have to be relaxed, and you have to be trusting, and so forth. And women tend to be more pliant than men. That, I think, is cultural. But then I don't have many women clients, but that's because I'm such an aggressive guy. If it all works, it can be a useful tool.
You have a book coming out, an operating manual for enlightenment, rebuilding your mind. We talked about rebuilding your mind a little bit. That's what this book is about. Are they related? Or are you talking about something else?
Yeah, I'm talking about that. I wrote the book because there's a push these days in the use of psychedelics for psychological improvement. And they're using psychedelics as medicines. They're saying it really works well for depression, and it really works well for post-traumatic stress syndrome, and it works well sometimes for addictions. So you take these psychedelics and they don't really know what they're doing because they're Western doctors, and this has been considered a poison for so long. Schedule C drugs are outlawed. And so they're saying, we'll just make you feel comfortable, put nice music on, then give you this psychedelic, have you sit there with eye shades on, sit with you for 6 hours, charge you $1,500, and then we'll go back to our usual psychotherapy. I think this is horseshit. I guess it works, but there's thousands of years of tradition for using psychedelics, but they're not Western. It's religious and cultural, shamanic and indigenous. And those people, nobody wants to talk to them because they don't have PhDs. And it's the kind of thing that just, gets my dander up. It's like, nobody wants to talk to the street people. If you want to understand street people, you better talk to street people. If you want to understand psychedelics, you better talk to the people who use it and not think that this is just going to be a medicine that you're going to, create by Merck or Pfizer and give in a particular dosage and charge $1,500. That drives me crazy. But that's what people are doing. I wrote this book because I wanted to start people. Of course, I'm going to fail, right? Because nobody wants to listen to me because I don't have the money. It's very money oriented. Medicine, pharmaceuticals, government policy. It's very money oriented. So, but I figured, what the hell? I'll write the book anyway. It's about what happens in your mind, how to deal with altered states, how to create altered states, what are the components of altered states, and I talk about the neurology, your brain, your waves, and I talk about your emotions, how your emotions are largely the guiding force for your decision making, not your reasoning. Your reasoning follows what you think is important, what you focus on. Gets back to your first question, why am I the way I am? It's because it's an emotional inclination of mine. And it was an emotional inclination of my professor not to be spiritual and to be overly intellectual, even though that was his aptitude and he's rewarded for that. So I talk about these things, your upbringing, your family, your needs, your trauma, your brainwaves, and altered states. How you can get into them, as we said a moment ago, through meditation or through mindfulness or through following the pain, whatever, the dreams, dream work. And so it pretty much breaks down in those three ways: emotions, intellect, and neural hardware. And those are the three parts of the book. How to use those, how to train those. And it's basically saying that this is the box you're in. I don't care who you are. This is the human condition. We build the boundaries of what we're going to put up with emotionally, what our skills are intellectually, and what our habitual brain patterns are. And then that becomes our container and our constrainer at some point. And if you're happy just with your mortgage and your lawn and your 2-car garage, fine. God bless you, whoever bless you. But if you're struggling either to exceed expectations or to simply achieve a pain-free life, then you need to talk about the boundaries and how you might expand them or cross them. And some things you may need to get rid of. And it may not all be happy. You may have to get rid of your in-laws. Everyone gets get rid of their in-laws. Take that as a metaphor for other things that you're attached to. That's the book.
Every peak performer at some point in life questioned, is this really the peak? And how do I get better? And a book like this is worth its value in gold. A person like you, who is truly about honesty and truthfulness and digging where it needs to be dug, as opposed to digging where I should be digging because I'm told to be dug there, or just praising people for the sake of collecting a couple dollars. People like yourself are very hard to find. It's an honor and a privilege to really talk to someone like yourself who's experienced life a certain way and therefore observes people a certain way and guides them in a direction that is just paved with honesty and truth. So thank you for being on the show. Any last words for our audience members?
I think the human condition is not fully evolved. We are not full balanced people. And if you look around in the world, you don't see a lot of balance, you see a lot of imbalance. And you could blame it on a lot of things, governments and cultures and religions or whatever. But I feel what we're really called to do is work on ourselves. And you lift other people up when you lift up yourself. Even though you can't change other people according to the way you want them to be, other people change when you change. And I think that's our imperative, is to improve ourselves. And you may not even know where the peak is or where the boundary is. But I encourage everybody to engage in that process. I think it's our obligation. In any way you want, come to me, read my books, subscribe to my blog, hire me, but you have to be discerning. Most people will give you what you ask for and you'll get what you want. The famous saying, be careful where you're heading. If you keep going in that direction, you're likely to get there. So it's full of contradictions. Work at it. The guy who told me, I don't know why people climb, there's so much suffering in it. Life is that way too. And I just encourage you to do it. I don't know what you want to say. There'll be gold at the end of the rainbow. But that's not really true. But I think you have to be positive and feel that you're doing the right work and it's valuable for you and everyone. So
in a world where everybody's telling everybody to slow down, everybody's telling everybody to just be content with what you have and be full of gratitude, there's some of us who want to go faster and go further and understand where our boundaries are. And for those people, you're a blessing. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.